Hello, nice to be with you. My name is Tove Skutnabb Kangas. At TESOL 2008 I asked, what can TESOL do in order not to participate in crimes against humanity? What is TESOL doing? You could just read my short conclusion from 2008. I could just repeat it because my reply now in 2019 is, in practice, there has been very little change. What I will say will be a shock to many of you. Reflect hard on the message before you shoot the messenger. And remember that this almost 80-year-old messenger has researched and reflected on this for a lifetime. Teaching and learning English is part and parcel of formal education that should support children in increasingly many parts of the world to become minimally bilingual, preferably multilingual. If TESOL only supports the English part of this multilingualism, you may and mostly are participating in linguistic and cultural genocide. I'm here concerned with ITM children. ITM stands for Indigenous, Tribal, Minority and Minoritized or Marginalized children. This also includes immigrant and refugee minorities. According to UNESCO 2019, around 40% of the children who attend elementary school in the world, and many don't, are not taught in a language that they understand. This language that they do not understand is often, but of course not always, English. What does solid research and educational, linguistic, pedagogical, psychological, sociological and political science argumentation tell us? If ITM children are educated using a dominant language, such as English, as the main teaching language in a submersion or even early exit transitional program, this prevents access to education because of the linguistic, pedagogical and psychological barriers that it creates. Thus, it violates the human right to education. This right is expressed in many international human rights documents, also in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 29. This convention has been ratified by all other UN member states except Somalia, and the United States was the next but last of the world states that ratified it. Submersion and early exit transitional education often curtails the development of the children's capabilities and perpetuates thus poverty in the world. This conclusion is based on economics Nobel laureate Amartya Sen's theories on capability development. The theories have been developed further for multilingualism by Ajit Mohanty. We launched his latest fantastic book, The Multilingual Reality, Living with Languages, in November last year in India. The book is very relevant for all TESOLers. The assimilationist education that many TESOL members are involved in very often forcibly transfers or attempts to transfer ITM children from their own group to the dominant English-speaking group, both linguistically and culturally. This education also can also cause very serious mental harm. Social dislocation, psychological, cognitive, linguistic and especially educational harm. Partially through this, it often also causes later economic, social and political marginalization. The results can be seen in many countries and the consequences can last for several generations. Both of these, namely forcibly transferring children from one group to another group and causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, are two of the 5 definitions of genocide in the United Nations Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Articles 2b and 2e. Educating a child always happens in a holistic social context, and understanding the context is vital for any educational changes. There's no reason to restrict a discussion of genocide to the discipline of law. It has been described and discussed in many scientific disciplines. And when I discuss genocide here, it is from a historical, sociological, linguistic, psychological, economic, cultural anthropology, and political science point of view, meaning not only from strictly legal point of view. It is extremely important, though, to emphasize that you, TESOL English teachers, can, as individuals, be absolutely wonderful, hardworking, creative, and well-meaning in your teaching. You may work incessantly against discrimination and racism and linguicism. Still, an education that excludes the children's or their parents' mother tongues as languages of instruction can and often does constitute linguistic genocide. This is true even if there may be a few words of the mother tongues on the walls of the classroom and other feel-good attempts to respect the mother tongues. You are still discriminating the children. The legal definitions of discrimination are today changing from so-called evil motive discrimination, meaning actions intended to have a harmful effect on minority group members, to effects discrimination, meaning that actions can have a harmful effect, whatever their motivation. When discrimination and racism, including linguicism, permeate society not only at the individual but also at the institutional level, both covertly and overtly, racial control has been so well institutionalized that the individual, for instance a teacher, generally does not have to exercise a choice to operate in a racist or linguist manner. Individuals merely have to conform to the operating norms of the organization, and the institution, for instance a school, will do the discrimination for them. This means that the way schools are organized to exclude ITM children's mother tongues as teaching languages can function genocidally. When states persist in implementing these English-only or English-mostly educational policies in the full knowledge from research of their devastating effects, the education can thus sociologically, psychologically, linguistically, and educationally be termed genocide, according to 2 of the 5 definitions in the United Nations 1948 Genocide Convention. But this is not all. Worse to come. Article 3 of the Genocide Convention enumerates the 5 actions which are punishable. According to Article 3e, even complicity in genocide is punishable. You can thus be complicit if you accept the English-only or English-mostly education. Article 4 about accountability lists the persons committing genocide, even those who are only complicit. They shall be punished, whether, and I quote, whether they are constitutionally responsible rulers, public officials, or private individuals. Thus, educational authorities or teachers who are attempting to forcibly transfer children of the group to another group by forbidding or preventing them from using their mother tongue or enjoying their culture, and who have not tried to change the system so as not to be complicit in genocide, should be punished according to Article 4a. What I'm saying today is, as usual, 50 years ahead of my time. I can assure you that you TESOLers here will most likely not be punished in my lifetime. But you should at least know what the convention that your country has ratified states, and act much more forcefully than you and TESOL have done so far. I asked 10 years ago, what can TESOL do, here and internationally, in order not to participate in these crimes against humanity? My answer was then and is still mother tongue-based multilingual education for ITM children. If you do this, ITM education could promote high levels of multilingualism. This would give better results in terms of school achievement, learning of the dominant language, in your case English, and issues around a positive self-confidence and multilingual identity. Now, what about money? It is clear economists tell us that not even the initial short-term costs would be more than a few % higher if you organize mother tongue-based multilingual education. In the middle and long term, this education would lead to considerable savings. This would include eliminating much of the so-called illiteracy of tens of millions of children worldwide, and it could eliminate today's educational wastage. Today there is a lot of nice talk. There are even some good intentions and some good laws, but overall there is far too little implementation and action. You can change this. Please do. Thank you for listening.